Hi, I'm your Gemini friend. How are you doing? I hope everybody's doing great. Life is weird, isn't it? Okay, so this video is going to be about Lilith in Cancer and Lilith in the 4th house. I do have a video in the description that goes more into Lilith. And if you are curious about your own natal chart, I do offer natal chart and synastry readings. Information for that will be in the description. But when it comes to whether it is the sign or the house, you want to interpret Lilith in the sign as if that sign was the expression, the personality of Lilith. And if it's in the house, the 4th house in particular, this is going to deal with this area of life that is like the home, the roots, the family, security, a feeling of safety, and the emotions, emotional connections with people, emotional responses, very much related to family and childhood. And Lilith, this is going to be a part of us that we are essentially rejecting within ourselves, but we were taught that it was shameful, taught that it was not the right way to be, bad, something that we're not fully embracing and accepting within ourselves. Lilith wants us to reclaim that. And with Cancer energy in particular, there's a lot of femininity wounds here. Feminine, not talking about being female, but we all have masculine and feminine energy within us that ideally will be balanced. Masculine energy is more about pursuit, while feminine energy attracts. It's so much more complicated than just that. But when you have Lilith in Cancer, this can indicate difficulty with receiving, difficulty being vulnerable, being in a situation where you are being nurtured, taken care of, possibly a complete rejection of vulnerability or like receptivity to emotions entirely. But Lilith tends to express itself in extremes, so it can go strongly one way or the other in the distortion of the energy that it's in. And the house that it's in can also represent areas where we feel persecuted, where we have enemies. And this can be a really difficult one because there can be a real difficult family dynamic, and likely never really having a fully healthy family situation. This can be one or both parents having some pretty intense issues and causing damage because of this. This can be heavy family baggage, feeling really weighed down by the very concept of family. And it tends to come with like ancestral trauma. People who have Lilith in Cancer or in their 4th house often are meant to be breaking ancestral patterns, negative cycles within the family, and just a lot of complexity to work through when it comes to how you associate with your parents, your family, the very concept of like having a home and family, or any feelings that you have towards creating a family of your own, having children, being a parent. There can be a lot of pain here just surrounding the very idea of being a parent. You might have had parenting modeled very poorly to you, possibly a lot of stress, maybe trauma early on in life. And of course, this can result in all sorts of like emotional issues, difficulties in trusting people, difficulty feeling safe, feeling like you're allowed to have like a comfortable home base, because this energy is so much about feeling comfortable within your emotions. This is Cancer, it's the moon, and the moon represents our inner landscape, the way that we mother ourselves, the way that we were taught to treat ourselves, our inner voice. Always consider whether your inner voice is something true and genuine to you that makes you feel better, or if you are taking on someone else's opinion and continuing to let that affect you internally. And there could be a feeling of like being very othered within your family, like the black sheep sort of situation where you didn't feel like you were ever made to feel like you fit in. Your idea of your family could be more like they are just acquaintances, people that you associate with when you have to. And this can be a healthier way to handle it sometimes. It totally depends on within your own chart, like your own specific situation. And of course, how prominent Lilith is within your energy is going to depend on your overall chart too. But often in this sort of situation, you might feel like you need to move out as soon as you possibly can, separate from the family, or be entirely no contact with them. I do think it is important to deal with everything that you can within yourself and try to come to understand, like, everyone that played a role, what this could possibly mean as far as what you can get out of it. But it's entirely up to you, like, whether or not you want to fix things with your family or whether you want to be entirely separate from them. Only you know what is going to be the healthiest for you. But it is really, really important, above anything else, that you heal what you have inherited and make sure that you don't keep it going on for any more generations. Being aware of this placement and doing everything that you can to improve the situation for further generations, that's going to be a big thing here. I mean, this is a heavy Lilith placement to have. It can be a sign of having quite a strong soul incarnating in a difficult family situation, because this affects us for our entire life. This Cancer energy, the way it's related to the mother, like I was saying before, you ideally learn how to nourish and nurture yourself and process your emotions from your mother. Ideal motherly love should be unconditional, and it should be wanting the best for their child, but that doesn't always happen, and nobody deserves that. But it's up to us to make the best of our situations and make sure that we're not hurting anybody else, stopping it. So Cancer energy, this is water, the moon, we have the tides, the moodiness that's associated with Cancer. So there can be a lot of difficulty within, like, regulating the emotions or really understanding the emotions when they arise. There is a need to develop a really healthy sense of, like, what your feelings mean, instead of rejecting them or prioritizing, like, practicality over actually feeling your feelings, because your feelings are here for a reason. But if you find that they're particularly disruptive or confusing, there's something underlying. It's that shadow aspect of yourself that Lilith represents that's trying to get attention. It keeps coming up because it wants to be seen, it wants to be comforted, it wants to stop being rejected, because that's the whole thing with Lilith. We're rejecting a core part of ourselves because we were taught to, because society shames, especially, like, this very feminine energy in particular, the idea of the mother, the idea of nurturing the emotions, like that, just that in society can be shameful. Like, taking care of yourself, there's guilt there sometimes. There never should be. But it represents, like, an issue with that concept of unconditional love. We should be extending that to ourselves. We should be loving ourselves unconditionally and just allowing ourselves to be as we are, without judgment, without guilt, and, like, overcompensating by working extra hard. What that is it's leaning even more into the masculine when it's the feminine that needs that healing and needs that recognition. That just further creates this imbalance that Lilith represents. But Lilith, especially in the fourth house, this is, like, related to the depths of us, our roots, the origin of our being, and the connection that we have to that. Imagine your family is like soil, and your roots, like, just picture in your mind or feel, like, with your heart what those roots look like. You want it to be healthy. It's important when it comes to your own emotional nurturing that you're getting your nourishment from a positive place. So check your soil. Like, the fourth house, it's our home. It's our safe space, the environment that we can relax and, like, rejuvenate ourselves with. It's the sanctuary, and having Lilith in this energy does represent a strong need to have that sanctuary and that place where you can just fully be in your own energy and acknowledge what needs to be acknowledged. often with this placement, this is a home separate from your family, your birth, childhood home. It can be just very cleansing to have a place of your own. Of course, everyone's circumstances are different, but creating a space that is private and yours, any way that you can do that, that's going to be really important for your energy and your emotions. Because this can represent just like an overall difficulty with the idea of feeling supported by other people, like allowing yourself to be supported, to be nurtured, because that can feel so unfamiliar, so uncomfortable that we just want to reject it. It's like not getting that healthy nourishment early on can create a relationship with being taken care of, like in all aspects of life. This can be just shouldering every burden, the burdens of everyone, and feeling like you have this strong responsibility to take care of things because you never felt like you could just rest and be taken care of. This is why really acknowledging and nourishing your own emotions is so important in any way that you can. Like, find your own self-care style and do that as often as you can. It can, like, feelings of shame really can come from this. It can be so uncomfortable to allow yourself to actually be comfortable for a while, to do the things that make you feel safe. Because that feeling of safety, it likely was not modeled to you. It likely is an unfamiliar feeling. But, like, but it's important to recognize which things feel bad because they are bad for us and which things feel bad just because they are uncomfortable and something that we haven't really experienced before. Because, I mean, the key to this placement is going to be emotional stability. And this can be a complicated thing to even figure out because emotional stability is not necessarily keeping yourself level and never reacting to things, never allowing yourself to feel things, to like cry when you need to. We have to cry sometimes. It's like a biological thing for humans. And when you've gotten that out, then it's gone. Like every time you allow yourself to have an emotional release, you've got less of that inside you. You're acknowledging this Lilith, this part of you that is hard to look at, hard to acknowledge, hard to even accept that it's like a part of you. Because feelings, expressing emotions, being emotional could have been something that you were taught early on is just not acceptable. A responsible person doesn't get upset about things. You might have had this behavior, the idea of being emotional represented to you in a very unattractive way. You could have had emotionally unstable people around you freaking out and making you see emotional reactions as an incredibly horrific thing, even. But there's a difference between a completely separate person's outbursts and your own body's need to feel and react to things sometimes. There can just be like all emotional expressions are bad, or maybe only some emotional expressions are allowed. Like maybe you were shamed for expressing sadness or disappointment, so you do your best to never ever appear sad or to never express that you were disappointed with something. However, maybe anger was modeled to you as something that is like more acceptable. So when you do allow yourself to express your emotions, it tends to come out in like anger, or, you know, it could be anything. But I say anger specifically because with the whole issues and balance of feminine and masculine, because of the way that society tends to value masculine expressions more, anger tends to be more acceptable than sadness for a lot of people. Of course, I'm generalizing, but this is at least something that I've seen in my own life. But all of this to say, emotional stability is discovering your own healthy relationship with your own emotions. And for this placement, it tends to be better to explore this sort of thing in private first. It might just feel more comfortable to be alone when you're facing these things inside you that could have been there for forever. But unresolved feelings, unresolved ideas that we have, that we've had projected onto us, with everything, it's so important to remove everything that's false to us, remove all of the parts of us that come from the ideas of other people telling us how we need to be, telling us how we need to not be. It's about creating a filter and like identifying, okay, this behavior that I've always had, this comes from my family. This isn't me, and I don't need to handle things this way anymore. Or growing up, I was taught not to do this, but I actually really want to do that. So like allowing yourself to do that without the shame, which is easier said than done, but it's so important to be really gentle with yourself with this. Like there could be the idea of being gentle and sweet to yourself could be repulsive, but you deserve it. You deserve it from yourself, especially. You're the person who's always going to be there for you. You are your own parent for your inner child. So please give your inner child like what they truly want, what they needed in that moment. This placement can come with inner child work, just being so necessary throughout your life. It can be a strong theme of getting back to who you truly were before your family or circumstances affected you, kind of warped who you were. It's about untangling, it's about getting healthy sources of nourishment and allowing them. But all of this is so deeply rooted in our very early childhood, early years of life. So there's just a lot here to work through, a lot to unpack, and a lot to process. But that starts with allowing yourself to process it, allowing yourself to have the feelings that you might think are horrible to have, that are unacceptable. And if your family is having a negative influence on you, do your best to separate from that. But do everything with love. I mean, understanding, I get how hard it can be for me to tell you to do your best to understand where the people that were horrible to you are coming from. But there can be a real sense of personal empowerment in understanding that those people, they're just people too. They're not as powerful as they might have come across when you had little to no power. There's a lot of that, like childhood distortion. You know, the way that adults are so big when you're tiny, it can be the same thing with the sense of how much power they have and how much power you continue to give the idea of them. So whether you want to have compassion or love towards them or not, or just want to recognize, okay, they're a person, they likely had reasons for what they've done too, and just allowing yourself to live on separated from that bitterness. It's just better for you to not keep resentment in your heart towards people. Of course, this can teach you what sorts of people not to associate with later on, and it can definitely show you how not to be, especially as a parent, as a fellow family member. But we don't want to allow all of this difficult energy from our past to hold us back. We want to keep moving forward. Focus more on yourself and your achievements outside of your family, outside of what they expect from you, and treat yourself the way that you would have wanted to be treated. Love yourself unconditionally because you deserve that. And you deserve that from yourself. So that's what I have to say on this placement. Feel free to let me know what you think. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. Bye.